You're live.
Excellent. Hello, world. This is the Podlair team once again. We're doing Interpretives Temple this week. And in Interpretive Temple, we like to talk about anything that has to do particularly with the NES channel, with interpretive powers and things of that nature. Today, we will be touching on talking about things in language that allows the interpretive powers to flow, that part of Phenomena to flow. In particular, a topic was brought up on the forum about the advantages of referring to the powers of the psyche of Phenomena as powers, and how that makes it easier actually for your Phenomena to work with it in a more holistic manner, as opposed to referring to them as functions, which automatically the language of that does something to your brain. And so we'll get into that a little bit. And then the other topic is dreams. I'm not quite sure where we're going to go with this, other than we're going to talk about why the dreams sort of have what they have going on as part of your overall spiritual process, and then how you can activate that more, and we'll talk about our experiences. And generally the idea is just to engender the conversation and to see where it goes, and knowing that doing that some of the spirits approve of. Once higher spirits approve you trying to dialogue in this way, it shows you're trying to learn their language. And so that will make for a higher level of dialogue and a greater level of fluency. Okay? And that's basically the main things. We may have a little special section at the end. We'll see. All right. Introductions. We get going. I am Nai Ji Coach.
I'm Najee Mitchell.
I'm Nai Ji Ben.
This is Nai Ji Glenn.
I'm Nijai Bruno.
Excellent. All right, so I think the best thing to do is I'll hand it off to, I guess, Mitchell to kind of field a quick reading out of the main thing where that thread was going at the end, and then we'll just kind of jump around from there.
Yeah. So basically the thread itself that Tamara started, she was just mentioning some pop psychology memes, and she was talking about how there are certain things that create a lot of misconceptions that are kind of dehumanizing, like the notion that real smiles elevate the cheeks and take over the eyes, which, I mean, it's just mathematically false for all emojis. That's actually not true. And so that would obviously dehumanize those logic-based lead perceivers, for example. And then Alcides came in and he said, I find a lot of the typology terminology in general rather dehumanizing. Function rather than power, for example. A function is something which you give an input to and get an output from in mathematics and computer science. And even if you look away from that, this term implies that there is some end in itself a function is for. For example, the function of a fork is to poke food. Powers are innate abilities. They can be developed or underdeveloped, weaker or stronger, harder to access, easier to access. They aren't really ends in themselves. They are part of a whole, part of a human being. And the human being is part of a group, and so on. Maybe we can't blame Jung himself for the extrovert-introvert distinction, since etymologically the way he used it does seem to correspond more with objective-subjective. But the way it's used in pop psychology now really messes people up from understanding themselves IMO. Actually, as someone who only took an in-depth look at typology after learning about Podlair, I think the Podlair terminology is a lot more naturally intuitive and meaningful than typology stuff. The only reason why people complain about the weird names is because they're used to their old typology stuff. If they approach it with a fresh mind, it really fits with the actual phenomena a lot better. So that was his post. And I was basically just agreeing with him, saying that I really don't like thinking of my powers as functions, and like the typologists sometimes even use the word to kind of give the model have some kind of seeming mathematical legitimacy, because they're just this kind of stuff. But that's not really what the powers are at all. They're not really, as far as I can see, something that just takes an input and always gives a deterministic output from that. They don't really seem to work that way. So I mean, I honestly think powers, even forgetting about how it helps your Phenomena work, even just from a purely logical computational standpoint, I don't know if it really makes sense to refer to them as functions.
I agree as well. The terminology for Podlair was chosen, as you know. I go through a lot of pondering on why I choose the words, and powers seem to be able to translate, as Mitchell said, into a math or logic-based use of it that breaks down to be very, very clean, solid math. But then you could take powers and move it on over to one's, personal fantasizing of being the hero on a quest, and powers also translates there accurately. In that case, it's like story math, but again, it translates accurately. It's very important to use the right language, and it's important to note that language is always chasing phenomena.
Yeah.
It'll always be the way of it.
And like I can imagine like the way that some powers work. Some of them might use functions, for example, like Z, for example. That seems like a power that would really benefit out of. But it itself, I don't actually think is a function. That's not really what it does.
It's part of your being. It's part of the whole experience of being a human. That there really is no other way to break it down. And something I'll mention on that as well is the language of Pavler. Say, for example, the original words and how they're done is something that this thing Zakidis was saying is very much true. Is that it's actually easier if you come into it from a fresh seeker perspective. If you try to translate another insufficient language, it's always going to seem hard, and crucially, it misses the point. And there's two things there going on. One is laziness. People just don't want to take the effort to learn what needs to be learned. And if you don't look into your spirit, not get the second point, and actually recognize there's a certain amount of effort that's required to really know this, and I've not done that yet. I shouldn't expect to get results commensurate with having done effort I haven't done. But humans like to do that all the time. They like to front and get rewards for fronting for things they really can't do or haven't done. The other part is spirituality. If you really try to understand it, if you don't factor that in, really, mathematically, it's incorrect. Like, you can look at the way humans are designed, and there's a clear need to use, say, interpretive powers, magical thinking, things of that nature. So that's part of the experience. So I think the fear of that overrunning logic or overrunning forensic data, for example, to back it up, the fear of that has led to like an alienating of it. But that's actually wrong too. That is actually like an incorrect way to work a case. If you can clearly observe there's like 4 channels that humans do, then the only thing to do is to account for the 4 channels and see
That's
how...
not logical not to.
It's not right. It's illogical otherwise.
You're going to run into problems.
One thing I noticed with the word functions versus powers, functions makes it sound like it's like a kind of job. You know what I mean? I just thought of it like that, and powers makes it sound so much more interesting. It sounds more, you know, like just more interesting.
Autonomous. It sounds like you have more
Absolutely.
control over power.
Like you're doing it.
That's exactly what I'm saying, Glenn. Is a function, it sounds more passive. It sounds like something that's done to you, versus a power sounds like something that you put out into
or
the
it
world.
sounds like it's just like happening on its own. Like you
it's
have
something
like
like
nothing
that.
to do with it. It's like
You're just like watching these
this
functions
is
go
the
on in your
function
head.
of the nose. It smells. I mean, like, you know.
Yeah.
And then it also falls into the distinctions between theory and practice. In science, you have functions which are theoretical. They don't really exist in nature. And then you have powers like electrical power, horsepower, etc. These are actual things that exist in reality.
Right.
Build technology with.
The power of a
Yeah.
bear to hibernate. Exactly.
Exactly. And so, function speaks of something theoretical, abstract, and somewhat passive in a sense, and power speaks of something real, concrete, and autonomous in a very real way.
Yeah, and there's absolutely no consideration to the thing being capable of being developed further. Like a function just sounds like A to B. Like you do this and then this happens. It's just
That
like,
is what it is. Exactly what a function is.
yeah, exactly. But a power is something that you can develop. Like if you're Superman, you have all these powers, and you can become better at using those powers. And they're in a sense they're alive and they're capable of being more and more developed further and further. So it feels more like respecting of the fact that they have like an essence to them in a sense.
Yep, very good point. Respectful and purposeful. I really like what you're saying there, Glenn. Is like because the vision I was kind of having, like when I'm hearing like the word function and so forth, it just seems like you like just when you're trying to come at high level things, you really have to ponder on the approach. I can't stress that enough. And so it feels to me a bit like the approach they're going for is to dissect it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Reductionist.
Break everything down to constituent parts until either what the magic goes away or they know the mechanics of it.
Yeah, it's only reductionism.
Why? Why is it there? What can it do? How do you use it best? That the whole approach to it is really, in its own way, it's not unlike lie detectors. Human lie detectors that want to approach Mojo reading from the point of view, can you detect lies? Well, you'll get a bonus to that, but if you overly focus on bonus stacking that, you will actually mess up your main targeting of knowing what humans are about. that's the main thing you should be trying to figure out. But I think there's other needs that push it. And that whole function thing, it feels like a need to kind of like just dissect the human condition.
Which is the only way to understand it. You're already limiting it by just trying to do that.
It becomes kind of like a lopsided kind of way of approaching things. You're not really accounting for all the other beauty of the math. You're just focused on this one area, and it's kind of like why is there so much focus on this one thing? Like it's kind of and not taking the other aspects into account as well to give it balance.
And as a part of that, very much that's very true. And I'd say as a kind of particular shade of that is it has like this built-in psychiatry. Medicinal, as a medicinal quality to it, as opposed to, say, for example, like in the Eastern medicine, I give them credit, they have a more holistic way of coming at it, and although in modern elite people in all fields pretty much have been adopting these principles because they're just superior. You're trying to get the most out of yourself, and as a part of that, you're monitoring how well you're doing. The wellness. Now, part of wellness is low wellness. But if you come from a medicinal point of view, it kind of starts with the study begins at unwellness. A lot of Jungian work just gets really wrapped up into shadow work.
Right, that's what he did for professionally. He was a psychiatrist.
It's emergency stuff, medicinal stuff, and that's missing like the whole purpose of that creature. Why natural even made it.
And the descriptions in the psychological types read a little bit like that. Like he says they're not he specifically says that no one actually is a pure function type. Obviously we know that even more, but just that they're so one-dimensional that they're not even really describing people anymore.
There's a difference.
They sound like functions.
There's a really critical difference, I think, in terms of how you approach things as far as like in health and psychiatry, like approaching it from the perspective of like trying to address this problem, trying to address this disease versus how do I achieve optimum, like capabilities. Like there's a difference there. One's more positive, one's more negative. And when it comes to most of, I think, the Jungian stuff, it's like these are all problems and they need to be understood, like psychiatry. Like these are all the drugs that you need to take in order to fix these problems, and it's coming at it from a completely from the wrong perspective.
And that's known to be the data he was working with. Most people they're working with.
Yeah, like sick people.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're going to get a very bad understanding of what humans are capable of if all you do is study sick people.
And the paint and the descriptions, they don't really sound very autonomous. Like if you look at what he describes, like an introverted thinking type is someone who automatically thinks in a certain way.
Yeah.
Instead of actually being able to take
and also
charge
like
of their
habitual
powers.
thinking, like what someone happens to be habitually thinking.
Exactly.
So
It's all habitual use.
It's interesting if we put aside Jung's work and just think of him as a person and his mojo. He's a really interesting person because he had all sorts of like dreams. Like for example, right before World War I think he had a dream that he was standing on a mountain and the world was filling with blood and corpses were flowing everywhere.
He had a very interesting.
Yeah.
Although, just to be honest, I gotta say, I don't think much of Jung in this regard for a few reasons. Real quick, one, he's a Nazi. You thought he was a Nazi or something else of that sort. he really,
Ziny for a while or something.
yeah, he never really got his relationship squared away, like the marriage thing, the expectation of it just kind of like owned him for most of his life. He had like a workaround relationship, but he never kind of just said,
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like he's interesting for all his flaws.
yeah.
But despite all that, he makes a very interesting case because
Oh, sorry, the third one, I just have to say this. Every Naiji has apocalyptic dreams. And sometimes when a Naiji has apocalyptic dreams, gnarly shit happens in their era. And then they always say, I mean, but I don't know of any Naiji that if you get into their dreams, there isn't some like doom and gloom and spite.
Oh, sure. I mean, I also have those kinds. I also have those kinds of things too.
So I'm saying is, any Naiji or Nijai, as you were saying, any person who's having these kind of dreams can say that, and there'll be I mean, if a war happens at the time they do that, then it'll be the same thing. But I think every generation, you're just gonna have a lot of people who are having those thoughts.
Of course, it wasn't truly apocalyptic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like how people would say like that the Earth or the Sun orbits the Earth, for example. Like that's incorrect, and we know it's incorrect. But by looking at the people that talked about it, we can at least, we have some record. We can at least think about and talk about how things were done in that era. So I think it's interesting in that regard. But something Alcides was touching on, I think, is that functions are deterministic by nature, so that you put something in, you're guaranteed to get something else out, which goes totally against what we understand about autonomy, science at a very deep quantum level, and things of that nature, consciousness.
And this is why approach is so important. Real quick, it's just you have to understand the psychology or the background, the context that people are saying these things because it affects their thinking. And a critical element is Jung's kind of background. It's a Christian, Jewish kind of area that he's coming from. That's that whole way of mythologizing things you encounter.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like those schools of thought, like Austria and Germany, that they had like humans. What's what I'm looking for here? Okay, here it is. There is a pervasive in their literature, their fantasy literature. That area of the world that he came from has a tradition of nature is something that humanity must figure out how to pin down, to break, like a wild animal that will just mess everything up.
The Siegfried myth, the myth of Siegfried. Yeah, he talked a lot about that. I mean, I don't
influencing, because basically studying the nature of the human condition, but his understanding of nature is kind of like not
exactly. I mean, and he was at a time when Hitler was rising to power and all these things. There was so much like crazy bad negative energy in the air. It just totally seeped into him. In a way, how could it not?
Right.
But
yeah.
Hey, at least he was.
Well, I can tell you again. This is why I dig him on this. He should have isolated himself more. That's like a thing. That's like Ni Alpha 101. If you can't get a clear signal, you got to isolate a little more so you can get that clear signal.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even
things with spirits that he then didn't do. He said they said things to say, and he said I can't say that.
He was too attached to the world.
He was.
He was too attached to what other people thought.
A deeply flawed person. I mean, and mostly incorrect in almost everything. But
Coach, at one point, I think you said that he gave in to like the academics at the time and made his vision like something that it shouldn't have been or something at one point.
Well, he wanted to make it palatable to them.
He wanted to make it palatable, exactly. And that, unfortunately, that's going to make it difficult to study it because when people try to study it, they, without realizing it, they take on the mantle of the person they think is best at doing that. So you have, for example, like in typology town, you got a lot of Naiji that think they're an IZ or Zini, and they're basically following the Jungian way.
Mm-hmm.
They're basic of actually coming at the human condition as some sort of surgeon. I'm going to dissect it now. And so that has to be pulled out. Now, I understand what Bruno was saying. He did actually make big strides, and he actually came out more than anyone else is coming out. I give him credit for that. I think he needed to be more upfront. For example, like myself with the Rosetta Stone, I could just show my Mojuri and you guys go, wow, but I feel a need to keep mentioning I'm working on a Rosetta Stone of 32,000 that's not even half complete. I feel it would be wrong to not put that context out. Do you mean, or that I'm estranged from my family? It's very important for people to actually kind of get the full context of where they're getting things from. And so there was a bit of an academic spin with Jung. So actually, just Bruno, I actually respect him in a lot of ways. However, unfortunately, he is used in conversation as a champion of things that he does not actually hold that claim to, and so generally that has to be disabused first. Just I'd like to give Jung more credit, except for Jungians. Jungians are so stupid, and what they do with it, that I have to point out why they're not holding the cards that they're holding.
Here's why I like to. I think he's interesting. I like to think that if he was here right now in this conversation, and he looked at your Rosetta Stone, he'd be like, yeah, you got this right. This is what I was trying to get at. And he would say, okay, you're right. What do you think we should do next? I think
I have to say no. And here's
why. Maybe
not.
Not. That's just...
No, just this is cool. This is the right word to be here.
Okay.
He would not say that I got it. Or if he did, he would be wrong. What he's then saying is that we were actually going after the exact same thing, and actually we weren't. He came from psychology trying to explain the human condition, then the archetype thing kind of happened to him as he was trying to make sense of things he couldn't make sense of, which is good. I'm glad it happened for him. However, I don't believe, from what I understand, that his goal is to actually save everyone. Because, for example, he kind of taught, I believe, that the world wasn't ready for a lot of his therapy. You should slow the process down. At least the young community, that's the general context, that it should be done behind closed doors, and you shouldn't let most people do it because they can't handle it. But actually, and this is very critical, Bruno, I don't accept that premise. That premise is incorrect. The premise is the only way it would work is everyone would have to know. I know I went through several iterations for Podlair of I didn't want to actually do it full on. The math will never work. If you contextualize the case in that way, it never works where it all fits together. It just won't. Because you've set the goal too small. You want to help people in a clinic. It's too small. If you're not actually thinking where it would go, the naive it is, naive is I actually. Once you realize that's a premise, it's going to get out, and then it's only a question of how, there'll be a period of being abused by people who know it and those who don't, and we'll have to get through that period as quickly as we can.
I absolutely agree, but I think there's also a little bit of a Christ versus Christians distinction here we have to think about, which is, we have the leader versus the followers, and the followers inevitably dilute the whatever it is that the original source is.
I understand. That's why
if it's real or not,
Agreed. And I don't pin the Jungian's flaws on Jung himself, but I am saying that something that I do a lot, just so you know, and so I enjoy this conversation. I could be wrong, and I look forward to talking more. But I imagine people around me a lot of famous people, people of unprecedented intellect and character, moral judgment making. And I try to figure out what they would do, and I either agree or disagree. And I do that quite a bit. It doesn't mean I'm right, obviously. These are speculations. But it is a game I like to play. And with Jung, I do think you would need to have a breaking of how he's approaching the case, which is, I believe he's coming at it from a medicinal purpose that will be used in certain settings, not a holistic purpose that will be done in every setting.
No, you're absolutely right. I guess I'm thinking of an idealized version where he's not brought up and lives in that strict society where everything is done. Like, for example, the kind of multiple relationships that you hinted at that he had, behind his wife and all these things. Those things were were somewhat commonplace. They sort of come and go in vogue. Like sometimes they're popular. Like in the 60s and 70s, that was very popular.
I'm making no moral judgments.
No, absolutely, I understand. I understand, but
it's an independent mind judgment.
That was exactly. That was a social constraint. I'm thinking let's take away all of that and just looking at his intellect. If he was a fresh, just his shiny baby, just the shiny baby portion of him.
Agreed.
If that was here, I think that at the very least he would be able to wrap his mind around what we're doing, even if he rejected it ultimately, and for that I give him credit. just for having the intelligence to do that.
You never really know.
You never really know, and it's just a guessing game. And obviously, you're better at that than I am at this kind of thing. And like, I mean, I'm good at music. Like, I focus on music. And sorry, Glenn. I think you're
It's one of Glenn's mic.
Oh, okay. I think he's back.
He has that slow robot voice.
Yeah, it was like
Right.
pretty loud too.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in terms of like philosophy or way of being, yeah, you're definitely better. You know, that's definitely your area. So I trust you on that.
This is my vision, and it's a guess, but this is what I would be wondering, because for him to understand truly what's going on, not in the way typologists understand a pod layer way of understanding, he'd have to be able to see the phenomenon to some degree to the point that he realized it's a thing, and then take a correction on what his mojo is. Maybe he could do that, but that would be a different Jung, a Carl Jung that was able to do that, and he has shown great independence of mind. But he would have to. The very first lesson would be, you're not a Nai-Z or Zai-Ni, you're a Nai-Ji, and that's a fact because data proves it, and your way of looking at it, which is conceptual, has led you on a trail of error. Perhaps he could do that. I don't know him well enough, actually. I want to say I don't know him well enough to really say the answer to that, Bruno. So
I actually read several of his books several years ago. I mean, like his diaries, his professional notes, and all these things. And the impression that I got was that he was a lot more insecure and unsure, and he was quite honest about it. But he just, because of his career and his position in society, and the fact that Sigmund Freud basically tried to squash him after a while. They used to be friends. You know, Freud was his mentor. But then after a while, you know, Carl, even, you know, I mean, if you want to talk about bad, Sigmund Freud was basically like a one-track mind about this. Like, he was just like taking mojo to the lowest, most basic level. Right. So, I mean, you know, Carl Jung compared to Sigmund Freud, at least, you know, we have to say that he was much more advanced than that. So we have to, taking all these things into account, he actually was very insecure. He was in a very precarious position. And so I think...
Yes and no. Yes and no.
I mean, he's probably pretty stubborn, I'm sure.
Okay, I have to check you on this one. As a mega genius, this is something I have studied. What is the apex of humans have done? And at this level, he's a leader of a huge way of thinking, so that it is relevant. In the things that Nai-Ji, for example, have done in his course, being unwilling to take the social pariah, you know, status from walking away from the social customs, that's something that's been done before. I got to say. I got to say that leaders of different movements, that's not the biggest deal. Just like me, some of my spirits tell me, because I moan to my spirits. My family this, my family that, and they're like, A, the Nai is, you need to do that in order to speak seen clearly, and the Ji, it's not something that other Nai-Ji haven't done. And that's the standard. So he knew he was constrained, and he didn't get past that. So I give him credit for going further than most other people, but that is something that's separate from his time. Because right now there's different social constraints. But the social constraints of his time, that's one thing, but actually throughout history, that is something that can be shrugged off, and has been shrugged off by others. That's a standard I hold myself to. And so when I'm talking about the person who founded the model, their headspace and their ability to get a clear signal, we have to be real stringent on that. Does that make sense? I think he was a genius that didn't allow his genius to flourish as much as it could, and I think he knew that and then didn't do it. I think he, from what I understand him, he's way too smart to not know that his social arrangements was a juggling act. It was a mental pain in the ass that would be way better if he could just do something more natural. But he decided it was too much. That's the wrong answer.
Yeah, I think he just gave up after a while, which is what I'm trying to say. He sort of just gave up, and I don't know. What I'm trying to say is that it seems like he would even be willing to take your outstretched hand if you were to say, "Here, let me help you and show you the way." But I don't know. It just seems like he gave up, and he got.
Right. Okay. So right there, that's a kind of like a Zai Wang. Again, I could be wrong, but we can kind of like weigh it with Zai and Jai here. I don't know what the answer is, Bruno. So I'm really I want to make sure that's clear. I don't. This is just guessing. But if I'm going to tell him that he is dating someone that's not his inspirational other, that's really awkward. Sort of similar in a way to the awkwardness of, having a mistress and being married and the whole shenanigans that going on there. He didn't seem like he could handle that awkward.
He was really bad at life. Like, he was terrible at life.
But it's important that being able to make those decisions to get clarity of mind. Like, this is key. Actually, I've known in real life and throughout history, there's plenty of Naiji that have, very amorous lives and are quite, interesting and provocative and controversial in that regard. However, within that, they're still able to find living arrangements or ways of expressing themselves that they can do it the way they want to do it. Like George Carlin, his first love was like radio or journalism or something, but he couldn't say what he wanted to say. Comedy was a second choice, he thought, until he realized independence of mind is my most cherished thing. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to define my career in terms of where I can keep thinking clearly. I don't know. I think he could see a lot. I'm curious if he could handle that. I don't know. Maybe he could.
I don't know. I mean, at this point, I like to think of him as the early scientists, just like the people that would think that that the sun orbits the Earth. It doesn't, or that or the Greek philosophers, like the Greek philosophers, for example.
Those are different things.
Like, they talk about like ether. The ether. There is no ether. It's just air. But it was sort of like an early precursor.
Actually not. Those are two different things, and those are actually the two things I'm trying to separate. So there are things that go with an era. In a certain era, you just don't know enough about geology to make good geological guesses. That's the time. That's what you're referring to, and I acknowledge that. Just like the social pressures are a thing that changes from different eras, and you have to account for that. That's true. However, social pressure and recognizing that what you thought was the answer is not the answer and correcting your course. Those two things, those are personal mastery challenges that occur in every era. And you can judge a person, like for example, if you're being shot at by a lot of bullets by an overwhelming force versus spears thrown at you with an overwhelming force or arrows thrown at you, it doesn't really, I mean, the motif of did you run or did you keep your shit together and actually win the day? Military generals, they study past generals for that reason. Do they actually study how they use those old stupid tanks? No, that'd be dumb. Right? Those tanks are dumb. But not life choices. Not critical life choices of did I give up my independence of mind? Did I lose my shit? Those ones actually can be judged in any era. You can judge those in any era. So my family had a lot of social constraints on me of how to be. Not they raised me very independent, but cult of family. I was raised in cult of family, and I have gone away from that. That is as hard or harder than what Jung had to deal with there. He didn't do it. And those are two different things, but they're actually the same motif.
I mean, it is cowardly what he did. I mean, I'm not saying that's not what I'm excusing. I mean, I think it is. I mean, to put it succinctly, I think what you're saying is that it was cowardly, and I agree. I mean, I think he basically just gave up in a lot of things. He settled for a lesser.
Okay. Real quick on that. Yes, I'm saying that, but I don't want to sound too harsh. It is important to note that this is not just generally how I come at people, but when you're talking about,
I know.
You're talking about the fountain of a certain way of thinking. It is very important that you know the status of that fountain.
I mean, I said a few minutes ago that I thought he gave up. I mean, I wasn't trying to be harsh either, but to me that's basically
right,
like the lowest form of giving up, of cowardly.
I think it for me, I try not to be harsh. I just think at the minimum, I tried this myself, and I'm always working on it. There should be a mentioning of your headspace when you're doing this. When you're educating people about the human condition, I think you should be forthright about the status of your human condition. Again, he was raised where those things are generally kept a bit buttoned down, but that's actually the wrong way to come to the case. People would have to study him to know how to do it right. That's, you know what I mean? I think he was coming out. I think actually the celebrity thing helped him. It gave him more resistance against the traditional expectations.
You made it feel like a bigger deal.
Yeah, his independent mind, I think, got, well, he kind of clamped down some dumb ideas and left the world with them. But in general, I think he got more immune to his background's influence on him as he got older, which is good. It's just, I think that whenever, this is how I've always done myself. I recommend everyone else do it this way too. Whenever you are looking at any kind of model, you want to make sure you assess who made it, and why, and then a good canvassing of people who've used that and how it worked for them. Those are just some really good ideas. And so with Jung, those are kind of the things I'm putting on. Like, I just think it should be mentioned. A lot of people don't mention that. I think they're giving him a knowledge base that he didn't actually have. And I think what he did do is incredible, and it should be actually just seen incredible on its own merits. But I think people get a bit confused sometimes on exactly what was brought to the table.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I give him credit for is opening up the conversation. And this is what he said about Freud, too. He totally did not respect Freud after a while. I mean, Freud was his mentor at first, but then when he realized Freud is only focused on this one thing and he won't really let go of it, even after, you know, significant evidence to the contrary, he lost respect for him. But he always said this about Freud: I respect him for opening up the conversation and getting people talking about something that was controversial before him. And in other cultures, maybe it's different, but at least in this setting, in this context, he opened it up.
He did.
And so I give Jung the same credit he gave Freud, which is to say, you know, he at least opened up people's vocabulary about that and got people, even if it's wrong, even if there's a lot of mistakes and a lot of problems caused by it, at least people are talking about something they weren't talking about before.
Real quick, one question. I'm sorry, totally random tangent.
Sure.
Mitchell, did you send an invitation to Demas?
I believe so.
I think so. I think I saw him on the list. Yeah. I think that's interesting. I mean, that's another reason I like Philip K. Dick, for example, who I've mentioned. I mean, I think he's just like brilliant. He's like one of the most genius guys in the 20th century. I mean, his writing is like very sloppy. It's just like very like fast, like get it to the paper. He had deadlines. I mean, he would write at a pace that like most authors could not keep up with, just because he was paid so little. Because science fiction was not very respected at the time. And he was not very good at like promoting himself, making himself like a business guy. He was terrible at that. But his ideas, like, they just opened up so many like topics that we're just now starting to get at, and they relate to Mojo in such deep ways, like in terms of like autonomy and like what it means to be a human. Like, what does it mean to be a human? And he was really, really frank and honest about the fact that he doesn't really understand it, but he's grasping at these ideas in a way that's much more sophisticated and courageous than Carl Jung, because I mean, Carl Jung basically he sacrificed his intellectual and spiritual integrity, I feel like, in order to make sure he had social status. He had like numerous romantic relationships around him. He had people coming up to him as like fans, and
by the way,
I
don't mind relationships. I just mind someone actually having to tiptoe around what they believe to be their natural way. If that's your natural way, then you should just.
If that's your natural way, then go for it. But
yeah,
the fact that he could have had a lot more intellectual integrity if he'd sacrificed some of these other things. You know, he could have had more independence of mind. A lot of the reasons why he stayed in where he was and did the things he was because he didn't want to change. He was afraid of going beyond that. And Philip K. Dick was completely the opposite in that regard. Like, he basically sabotaged his life left and right, and he died, much younger than Carl Jung. He had a lot of health problems, a lot of mental problems, et cetera, et cetera. But he really took it to the limit. Like, he took it as far as he could, and then a little bit more. Like, Carl Jung, it just feels like he sort of saw that there was something beyond, but he was really scared to go there, and that kind of fear. I mean, that's just not fitting for like.
That's the thing was with Carl Jung. You kind of hit something nail on the head. By the way, I think what you kind of mentioned there are like the two ends that Anaiji wants to be in the middle of. Because with the other person, you want to be able to keep yourself healthy as you can, have a long run to be able to put as many insights you can over a long period of time, basically in a lifetime, maximum impact in the life that you can get. But then you have with Carl Jung, which is restraint. So to me, with Carl Jung, I actually give him credit a lot for talent as opposed to how he came at things, because he clearly was having some powerful simulator visions, and he was getting, I think, a lot of math given to him. But he dropped a bunch of it, and he muddied up a lot of the stuff he did get, and then he put it out, he did a bunch of stuff to it to make it have a certain window dressing. All that I don't like. But actually, I give him props on talent, because he was clearly seeing a lot more than other people were, both in his visions and with people to be doing what he was doing.
Yeah, but it's because of that. It's just as frustrating that he would let it go. That he would let it go. I mean, it's like,
that's exactly that's what obsessed him. Like, he could have gone a lot further. He had some serious talent.
Like it can actually be even more frustrating, because it's like he had so much talent, but then shouldn't you have actually, gone really far with it,
And that's
and made something of it,
For sure, and that's an issue when he comes up real quick. It's just that's why sometimes I have to say things about him is he did also go far. This is key. Obviously not as far as he could have, but that's because he went quite far in the wrong direction. Seriously, he has brainwashed most of a generation about subjective-objective being the main dichotomy. Mm-hmm. That's a spell. If you talk to people who know any pop psychology, the first kung fu you'll have to do on them is that. It's so deeply buried in their comic books and other shit that got Jung on them. Do you mean like it's just there?
Yeah. So, do you like to spend more time alone, or do you like to spend more time with people? That's the first thing, right?
So his sense on like his speculations of the right answers have to like brainwash people effectively.
I'm sorry, was that
like he had a really good sense, but like the way he like with the work that he done, the way he laid out and everything, that ended up brainwashing people in the long run. So
and even the function attitude.
Yeah,
in there too. With the it has to be one or the other. It's not like you can any configuration can like to be with people a lot nicer. Subjectives, but when we're in a certain mode, we could really want to be around people. And lots of nights you're in that mode pretty habitually, and they're gonna actually see themselves that way. Lots of other ones won't.
Yeah, and then it's really just a part of the overall approach which he took far, which is incorrect. A clinical approach to studying the human condition. That can be a facet of it, but if you actually contextualize, that will be the beacon, the wedge, the vanguard of how you solve this case. No, that will never work. And so that's a problem. His talent makes people want to imitate him and how he came at it. Actually, his talent took him farther than his methodology and life choices should have.
It stinks when that happens. It's really bad, actually. I mean, really, it leaves a lot to correct.
But the funny thing is, even going the wrong direction, his talent actually put his discoveries and what he was doing way ahead of his contemporaries. So that's always very confusing when someone who actually is just so talented actually manages to make a leap forward, but they're doing it wrong. And if you try and do it like that, you will never get anywhere but the wrong way. Yeah. But that's the person who actually has the furthest jump.
So that's what people are looking at.
Jumped off like this, and you have to jump
emulate that.
But no one's jumped that far at all. So like, that's how you do it. That's how you do it.
It's like that. That's the best that humans have been able to do so far.
That's why you got to look at Mojo and see we're a little bit farther now.
He's definitely a very flawed hero in that respect.
Super talented though. I give him that. I really have to do. His writing shows a powerful intellect, and his ability to actually say what he was saying. Just he must take a lot of shit saying what he's saying and staying where he was, because he basically tried to have his cake and eat it too, which I can tell you as an IALP you don't get to do. Your other will sometimes make that happen, but on your own, generally no. On your side of the story, you decide: do I want to be Apex Truth Pirate Radio, or do I want to get like, given a radio station, in which case I could say certain things in certain ways. You know what I mean? That's just how it works.
Yeah.
He actually said some stuff, and he was able to defend it over. I don't think that most people that interact with him were able to wield his intellect, which is another thing that is impressive, because you can actually have not quite the right model, but he was actually coming at qualia at a much higher way than his contemporaries were. And even though he was taking that secretness in the wrong way, the fact he was on that case at all basically put him above everybody else. So he kind of like talked circles around them. Their models really couldn't answer the questions he could bring up, and his model could. Like, it's way easier if you come from Jung's model, you can dismantle Freud's model fairly easily. Freud's model, you kind of just sound have sex on the brain all the time when you try to like use that against Jungian. And I think both of them obviously are like nowhere near what Podler's doing, but I mean, I recognize that Jung's stuff just sounds way more together. You know what I mean? Like, that's also why I think needs to be mentioned. For the Freud, for good or for bad, his certain contextual focuses are well known. And so when everyone studies Freud's work, his name's brought up, like, everyone just knows that. That's why I don't generally mention it, because, like, it's known. It felt like Freudian slip. Everyone knows what that means. But Jung actually had a lot of cultural contexting going on him, but generally he's like, no, he's a clinic man. He's clean. But no, actually, that was not a clean instrument working there. Although, that non-clean instrument dwarfed his peers.
And he also had that adversarial view towards nature, right? I think you mentioned that.
Yeah, but like I said, there is, whether he knew it or not, there is some misogyny in his work, and also just in general, like, trying to dominate the problematic aspects of nature. And even people who study his work, they've kind of taken that focus, which is studying the shadow, the emergency programming kind of thing. And you'll just never get the answers.
That explains a lot, now that I think of it.
It's like going into your elevator enlightenment every time and asking your Daru for the meaning of life. You will never get the fucking answer. I don't care how long you do it or how good you are, until you realize, wait a minute, I'm supposed to level up over you and keep going up these other things. Spend no time doing that.
And of course, the Daru won't tell you that because of what it is.
It's just
you gotta figure that out.
You should probably have another crazy orgy and see if that has a breakthrough. Or you should just go beat somebody up and see if that has a breakthrough. That might do it. I mean, but seriously, if you're studying sick people to understand how well people are supposed to work.
Yeah. Doesn't work that way.
But again, I go after his talent because he saw. His writings clearly saw he was seeing things, both in the simulator and the world. So if he actually could have gotten his instrument out to where he could have had, like, imagine him if he'd gone like all David Attenborough. Do you know what I mean? And allowed himself, where he was traveling a lot, seeing people from different cultures, and start applying his ideas there. Oh, he would have gone a lot further in the right direction if he had done that. Like I said, that's one, like, career-wise, he could have done that. In his lifetime, he could have worked where his career was more traveling to different cultures. Like, you mean, that was doable and would have really opened his signal up, but he just didn't do that. Hey, Charlene.
Hey, Charlene.
Hey, buddy.
We're just talking about functions, and actually, we're about to segue into the next topic, per timing. Dreams.
Oh, awesome.
Cool. Go grab a chair. We'll switch it.
Wrapping Young up.
But I agree, actually, just to bring up being interesting, just because of its historical context, but also for me, I feel a tremendous like dramatic tension in his character,
Right.
like the talent and potentiality. Because as an IG, I can recognize talent. I'm like, if he could do that, running around acting like he's in a relationship he's not really in, kowtowing to academia, you know, in that generally oppressive Germanic Austrian kind of environment. What could he have done if he went David Attenborough? Oh my goodness. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh.
What a waste, I think is.
Not a waste. He did, as I say, he did a lot, but he could have done a lot more. And some of what he did confuses people and sends them off their wrong road. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are now switching into the topic of dreams. I don't really have anything particular to talk about here, other than I definitely want to let some of the Naiji talk here and Jailene, because I know me and Bruno did a lot of talking on the last topic, which was great. But basically, I'll just say, as far as general set of the scene, is that yes, your dreams are part of your spirit forming that you're always doing your elevator of enlightenment. You do it consciously, and then do it unconsciously in your dreams, and they overlap. You can be waking and sort of, kind of lucid dreaming, where you're actually having the dreams while you're awake, or you are in the dreams actually sleeping, but you have more conscious control than one normally has when they're dreaming. So that's one thing, and I believe that it's fundamental to spirituality, and I'm surprised that when you bring it up that people generally think you're doing like shamanic stuff, and it's kind of weird. Shamanic stuff or Jungian stuff or something obscure, but actually I don't know how you don't use as a primary understanding, because clearly your spirit's trying to tell you things in those ways. Next is that talking about it increases your connection fluency with it, because your spirits like it.
Oh, yeah.
When you try and talk about it and try to figure out what it means, or just expressing it to a friend, it shows you're trying to speak their language, and they'll speak to you more. Okay, I will hand off to Jailene, and you guys just jump in.
Okay. So there's a lot to this.
So you can say what your general thoughts, and also the last dreams you've been having.
Yeah. So general thoughts. In general, my dreams seem to be like theme-wise. They can be kind of random, but they always seem to be like things that I'm trying to work on in my unconscious, like that I may not be ready to deal with in the conscious, so in my unconscious it kind of like tries to work its way through. So a lot of times my dreams are are of that nature, and let me see, I'm trying to remember the conversation we had about the dream that I just had recently.
I know that your work and how things are going, like right now you're in a new leadership position, which is exciting but also challenging.
Yeah.
And your dreams have kind of ratcheted up in sort of intensity and tone.
Oh yeah, so because of what Coach was saying with the the intensity of the leadership position that role that I'm taking on. My dreams have been intensified. And they seem to intensify during, high stress or high intensity sort of high stakes periods. This one right now, it's really because I've never had a role like this before, where I have to work so much with people in relationships and specifically as in a leadership sort of.
Just pushing them appropriately.
Yeah, so I have to push on them, but not appropriately, but not too much. And I have to be diplomatic, but also know what the points are that I the desired points that I can't budge from, and then there's a lot of gray murkiness of when's too far, when do you cross the line. So those are showing up a lot in my dreams, and
sort
of rapid sequencing of different scenarios.
Are they from work, or are they other things?
Other things that are coming in, but relationships and themes of taking control of my life and having power and dominant and sort of dominance themes, dominance control themes, and with different people. It could be people from my life. It can be people fictional. But yeah, and I always try to I know you guys have this experience. I'll try. It's sort of almost like a little lesson, and by the end of it, I try to exert my will to get it to change, and then sometimes I can get it to go my way, and then it'll sort of flip to a different scenario and sort of run another sort of simulator with different characters.
That is really interesting that your dreams are very control, discernment based, because my dreams are very I feel like they have a lot of meaning quests, a lot of looking for meaning, being out in the world and everything seems meaningless, going from place to place, can't find stuff, waiting in line, why, going over there, why, waiting in line again, why, you know, that kind of feeling. There's a
So I'm curious for the hunters here. If you experience this, that I agree that mine generally has a different tone being a hunter. I generally am being pursued by something.
that
Yes.
too. I have that
Or
too.
I
Actually.
am pursuing something and I can't get it.
There's definitely, I feel like there's always there's like some kind of thing that's going on in the environment, and you have to be able to understand it properly. So either it could be sort of like you're being chased by it, or maybe there's like this huge spider on the ceiling. You're like, what does that mean? It's just sort of like this, and you're daunted by it at the same time, but you have
A lot
to
of
like
stress of not knowing.
yeah, and then overcoming those kinds of things, and yeah. Curious what Bruno and Michelle, Ben and Michelle have to say about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah, I've had like various dreams throughout my life.
We talked about this a little bit and actually once we had a conversation about it.
Yeah, like dreams are really cool. It's funny. I have this one dream from my childhood. I remember it very distinctly. Um, and most dreams I completely forget, but for whatever reason, this one, kind of stuck with me. Basically, I was like really young, like 6 years old or something, and I was outside at night, and I was just walking along, and then suddenly this bush started chasing after me.
Holy.
I remember this. You told me this.
So like I was like running like hell, and then I just kept running away from it, and the bush was chasing me, and then eventually I got to the point where like I saw my dad, and he had like this like huge red truck, which is like his truck, and then I don't know, I guess the bush was gone. So I guess it's like family safety father figure
Sure.
Yeah.
dream.
What about when you like trip in a dream? Like then you wake up in real life.
Oh
or-
yeah, like when you fall or like
There's all kinds of
your
things that
body
happen.
jolts and you wake up. Yeah.
Yeah. You fall in your dream and then you wake up in your real life like, oh no.
Yeah.
All sorts of crazy things.
Like, that tends to be for me like in the initial stages of sleep, like when I'm like first trying to fall asleep, and especially like when I'm really really tired, and then I'll have like these false like I feel like I'm falling, free falling, and then I'll sort of like
my legs will kick. Like my legs will kick. That's like something. Like
Yeah.
right when I'm falling asleep. Yeah.
How often do you guys check your dreams on like internet and be like, what does this mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
dream
I was
about this or that.
actually really into dream interpretation. Like I went on Yahoo Answers, and they have this like section like just for people ask like what their dreams mean. I remember I used to like look into like various dream symbols. I would actually like give my own opinion on other people's dreams, like kind of be a connoisseur of their dreams. And it's funny, I had this thing happen like just as you mentioned, Coach, where like you have like your spirits like wake up like from the experience, like because I didn't know about Podler at the time, so I remember I had this like a couple moments like at night like where like I was like overwhelmed with like my spirits were like all like coming up and like talking to me and stuff, and I became pretty afraid because it's like whoa, it's like when it happens all at once like that, it's just like I don't know how to handle it. But I remember it was really cool, and I was really into it for a while.
They respond when you look into them. So it's good to kind of also study what the process is. So
It's funny because like I remember the answers I would give to people would be like, I think your unconscious is trying to tell you this. So I mean I was talking about spirits and stuff, but
sure.
Yeah, there are common themes. Like
They are.
I've never had these, but like a lot of people talk about like teeth falling. I do have the ones. I've had ones where like I go out of the house with no like bottoms, like pants or skirt or whatever, or
I never had those dreams.
Yeah.
I've had dreams in our
When
clothes
I was
before.
younger, I had a few of
You
those.
want to
Yeah.
the swing through the air.
The swimming through the air. So like
But you fly by swimming.
and then all of a sudden like something will like make you like
The air is thinner as you go
yeah.
higher, and for some reason, like the viscosity of it, as you get higher, it doesn't hold you fall. And then
Oh my god, I actually very
you start
similar
swimming
dreams to that.
again, and you're able to.
Yeah.
I had this one with a hill where I'm walking up a hill
Oh.
and you keep walking and you don't go anywhere. But it's like in a normal location. I had a dream like once back then in high school where I was in the dream. I was just in like my high school courtyard, but there was like a hill there that really isn't. It's kind of weird. Dreams can get weird visually like that, where you can things that are impossible. And you walk up, and it's like you're walking in this like mud. Where as you go up higher, you start not going anywhere. I don't know what it meant, but
it's like plateaus, I think, sort of like that. That's kind of like what comes to mind for me.
There's a lot. That's a big theme in a lot of my dreams. There's kind of like, well, I maybe not all of them, but there's a lot of like frustration. Like I can't figure this out. I feel like that's sort of like a Nyalva thing. Maybe maybe the Outer Realms experience that too. Because also there are other, obviously, when you get into dreams, there's a lot of synamnia involved. But that's definitely been a big theme for me in my dreams. Like even just trying to get a hold on what's going on.
I think disturbances between mojo, at least like priority.
Like that's something Nye is very concerned with.
Being leaned on and how you.
Well, a recurring thing for me, like the swim flying is one for me, and like the air gets thin, or like I'll see something in the bottom that's like below, that's like kind of ominous or something, and or like some like weird energy, and like I'll dip and I won't, I'll try to get back up again, but but have trouble. Another one is I'll have this one. I've had this one like for the last years recurring is where like I'll be in the middle of a dream and like random out of nowhere I'll have, and it's like different scenarios, different things, but jumbo jet will all of a sudden fall out of the sky, and it's like sometimes it's like several of them, sometimes it's one, and rarely do they, they never really fall on me. They kind of fall like in proximity, and it's kind of like, and then it just crashes, and it's like this big explosion, and then I sort of like. Like
a pilot is crashing, in other words, like your Jinai other.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's good.
It could
Take
be.
on it.
Yeah.
You're watching a pilot go off course, and
And maybe it's because you didn't take control, because you weren't. It's like this fear, like you weren't the proper tower that grounded it, so it crashed.
Well, maybe it's showing like the high stakes aspect of the pilot power for a tower. So like when you use your powers, as a tower, when you use your pilot powers, you really need to make sure that you do them right. Otherwise, it can quite easily. Exactly, because they're so intricate, right? Like the panel and everything with like a pilot, they have to learn so much in order to become really good at it and fly it properly through the air and stuff. It has to be like a good ground and air control kind of like connection and stuff like that.
Yeah, the connection. That's what I was thinking too. Kind of going with what you were saying, and also Bruno was saying, is maybe that you're not connected to the plane, and because it's not connected, that's why it falls.
Yeah, that's good insight.
Yeah.
Sometimes
it's like towers.
Sometimes it's more than one, and usually it signals. Sometimes I wake up when it crashes, and sometimes it continues. My dream continues, and then it's sort of like it becomes this, like me and the group, whoever I'm with, are trying to get away from this post-apocalyptic sort of environment that's been created by this crashing jumbo jet. Yeah.
I'm curious if someone else has this element. It's very frustrating because it's a recurring one that happens with mine, is that I'll be in a situation and I need to figure it out, either intellectually or like maybe courage-wise. I need to get over it.
It's like a perspective shift.
And while I'm doing that, it's very unpleasant. I'll just say it's very unpleasant.
Very unpleasant. And very uncomfortable, like frustrating.
But then does this happen? This particular element. Say for example, I'm in like some sort of like situation and I'm being like messed up and it's like it's really horrible, and either I can't figure out why it's happening, I'm too scared to do something about it. And at some point I'm like, that's the answer. Like I'm not gonna take it anymore. And so I turn around to do something. The scene changes, and I'm in a new shitty scene. And this shitty scene is the same thing. I have to like figure it out, and basically I just get like dumped on until I figure out what I'm supposed to do. And finally I'm like, aha, I have the sword. Scene change. Oh no, it was my turn. It's like as soon as the answer, it's like that's good enough. Like no, I really wanted to kind of get back at them.
How often does it happen when you actually wake up and but your body is still asleep, but you're awake and you can sort of like move your body, but you can't move it entirely, but then you start like fight against it, and then you're like, Then you kind of like get yourself to wake up.
Your body, oh, that's true. Your body's actually like still enacting the dream, but you're woken up. You're like, all right, time to go to the bathroom. Hey, come on, buddy.
Yeah.
It's still in that like because it sort of like has to do with your brain and the kind of chemicals that it releases to make it so the body stays absolutely still.
Yeah.
And then you have to fight against that somehow in order to get yourself to wake up. And at first I was like, when I first experienced it, I was like,
It's weird.
whoa, it's weird, right? And then it's kind of a little bit scary. Like, why can't I do anything?
How long is it gonna be? Am I paralyzed?
It's funny. I often get
Yeah.
to this point, like usually at the very end, I'll get to this point where like I regain control, like my consciousness starts to flood in, and I force myself to wake up. Like
Yes, yeah, that happens. But it takes a lot of willpower,
as
right?
soon as I realize I'm dreaming, I just like like the directive side, like my conscious, my consciousness reigns in, and then my directive power is just force myself to get out of the dream and wake up. So.
Interesting.
I actually learned a trick though from that reoccurring thing where it goes away once I figure it out. It's a little frustrating. Is I use a lot when I'm dreaming is that if it's unpleasant, if I can kind of focus in and get some kind of conscious control, I generally just don't worry too much about the specifics. I used to worry about the specifics a lot more when I was dreaming, and actually like your lower spirits use that to trip you up and mess you up because they can warp them and mess with them. I just focus on I'm the hero. I'm supposed to go forward and upward, and I'm going to do something. And as a kind of a visualization, I generally get hot. In the dream, like the environment will start like kind of like suffocating me in a way I don't like the actual scene is suffocating me, and I'll like stop. I don't want this, and that's kind of what I do now. I go, I want something else, whatever, and like. I now don't even really say the words. I just kind of like, you know what I mean? I kind of just hum with like, no, I don't like this. And basically just exert the idea that I don't have to accept this. I don't have to accept what the dream is giving me. I can have something else. And so kind of like, I like flame on. That's my way of saying like, new scene, please. I don't like the scene. And so that actually a lot of times will teach you a lesson. If I do that, I then will see what the principle is I was supposed to be doing. I used to run around for like the answer, but this gets back to the young thing, actually full circle. I've realized that even the dreams, I actually have to be like, stop being scared and think clearly, and there's the answer. And as long as I'm running around and don't acknowledge I'm scared shitless, I'll never get the answer. And all the drawers don't have the keys I need. Nothing ever.
Yeah, that is true. It's like
I have to get myself like.
There's a certain fear element with dreams because I've looked a little bit into this, and like one of the big obstacles that you have, like if you want to dream more, at night, one of the big obstacles is you have to get to a spiritual level where you're open to what your spirits are going to be telling you. So like that's a reason why you don't remember your dreams most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're describing basically actually describes Jung's writings and career a lot. It's just this desperate looking for things without allowing himself to see. He actually was his spirits were trying to lead him in a certain way, but he just shut it off, and he wouldn't listen because it was threatening to his career, his social status, whatever, his fans or his people that wanted to like love him, whatever it is that he wanted to keep and gave up on his integrity, his academic, his spiritual integrity, really. But
constricting the flow. The dreams.
Yeah.
When you do that, the dreams it's too painful for the apparatus to keep having that kind of high-level spiritual stuff given to you, and you don't internalize and process in your life. If the apparatus is just not making their life have a place for it, it's like, okay, we'll just keep this in the unconscious until the kid's ready.
I feel like that's a theme in like a lot of Niall Fedarian stuff, like this frantically needing to figure something out.
But it's interesting you mentioned like hunting or being hunted by something, because one recurring dream that I have is Z entities, anonymous Z entities like police or corporate henchmen chasing after me, and I go on rooftops, like duck into like abandoned houses and all these things. And
Reminds me of some Nijai authors, actually.
What's that?
It reminds me of some Nijai authors that I've read, like what's like 1984, I think. Something like
George Orwell. He's a Nijai. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, so it's a lot like that.
I don't know what else Mojo is off the top of my head, so.
Oh, okay.
I believe
So
he
yeah,
is.
I didn't know. But in any case, it's like a very Z flavored entity, and it's like chasing after me and it's like trying to pin me down. Um, and then there's a flip side. There's another flip side to that, which is like I'm basically lost. Like wake up in the beach with a gun in your hand kind of scenario that you described for Night Alpha. I actually have those dreams a lot where like I wake up, I don't know where I am, I don't know what I'm doing. Suddenly I'm in the car with a bunch of people and I have to figure out who they are and where we're going. And once I do that, the scene changes just like you described.
Yep.
And it's really frustrating. And like what I said about waiting in line, it's like a lot of mundane things mixed in with like violent, like disturbing imagery. And I don't know. I actually get very similar dreams a lot.
There's another one I thought of, Fahrenheit 451, which is that I'm sure is an Ishai Ray Bradbury.
Yes. Okay. I think so. And so there is a heavy element of hunting and being hunted, but a lot of it has to do with the Z channel, probably Vi as well. Like a dream I had this weekend was I was working with a bunch of guys and I was doing deliveries, like I was like a delivery boy for them, and I was like sort of helping them out, and then they were gonna take me to get a meal, and then we were gonna meet up with some other guy that they were also helping out. And so when I woke up, I was like, I kind of want to watch that movie Goodfellas now. And so I did, and it was really rewarding, especially because of John Pesci being purified to Nijai, and that being a character I'd always identified with. And like I know a lot of people, like in my family, they remind me of him, both male and female actually. That character of just like this like fast talking, like kind of like
Wild.
kind of little wild little person, you know, and and yeah, that was very rewarding. But so I try to go with what the dreams are saying and like try to think of them on like a almost like a literal level sometimes. Like I actually literally have to do this. Like I literally have to watch Goodfellas now, and it was like it was very rewarding. But
I do like trying to make a connection in the world for what to do with it, for sure. I find that they like that's another thing as far as like there's talking about it, but also trying to figure out what it might be and then doing something the next day. Like I'll get like certain like moods and I'll be like, it sounds like this soundtrack. I'm like, let me go listen to these songs I've listened to in a while. And it will kind of wake it up and make it, keep the flow going.
It'll give you like clues like that you can hold on to and then you can use. You're like, what does this mean? Like there's something about this thing, and then you look it up and then you're like, oh, this has some kind of connection.
The more they reach to get them to you, I've noticed. If you reach more to try and figure it out, they'll do more. Because I don't say like their spirits won't give anything, but you have to reach out for them and show effort.
I know writing down your dreams is very effective. Like I have some of my dreams written down because like as soon as I would wake up, I would just get
I have
writing.
an app on my phone. I have to write it down or I'll forget.
Yeah,
It's consciousness.
It's
Look
so
back at them,
fragile.
like
In the
Yeah, you have to write it down. Like I read something that your dreams you'll forget them within like the first minute or so, and then 90% of it you'll forget in the next
used
5
to
minutes
do
or something.
but I just got in the habit of rehearsing them, like like going over them. Like when I wake up, and if I wake up and I don't remember my dream, the first thing I do is I say to myself, don't move, don't do anything, but think about what you were just dreaming. And if I can't do that, then I just give up. But like, I used to write down dreams a lot because
Buried in the
I
vine.
wanted to keep track. But I found that actually it's even more powerful to just get in the habit of doing that, like prioritizing your dreams, saying whatever I was dreaming is way more important than anything I'm going to be doing or thinking. So like, just don't move. Like, just stay in bed. Like, don't even open your eyes.
That's interesting. I have a different approach. And I know that the approach you're talking about is actually the more recognized approach.
Is it? I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah, actually, that's considered a very good way to go about it generally. But my way is a bit different. It might be just because of my condition where I am with things. I sound off my spirits a lot, like constantly. So I make sure I get myself together and I go on these Google Hangouts and so forth. But generally, I'm a bit in flux with what's going on in my simulator versus what's going on around me. And so one thing I just always done with my dreams is I just start to talk about them to myself. And it segues right into a sounding off, which is just as rewarding, and I personally find it's more rewarding, and this is why, it works for me, is when you write down the dream, you're writing down what just happened. But what just happened isn't a thing. It's a trajectory. It was trying to show you something. So if I'm feeling in a quasi-state when I wake up, I'll actually just start talking in my head, as I do with my spirits all the time. I switch from going dream state to them like, why are we dreaming that? And I can hold on to the dream actually for longer than 5-10 minutes if I just ask my spirits, why are we dreaming that? And then I'll start actually talking out loud to myself, trying to like figure it out. But this is key. What they're trying to show me in the dreams, it'll just keep going now. Like I'll carry it over, and we will continue the conversation to its next levels. And then if I can like find Charlene, we can like go from and talk to her and so forth. Then like in describing to her what my spirits are saying, it'll give me more. Not just what I was dreaming when I was asleep, but they'll continue that giving of stuff in the unconscious. I found for myself when I wrote it down, even if I was able to capture a good amount of what happened, I noticed my spirits, for me personally, were actually already bored.
Mm-hmm.
Like they wanted to tell me the next vision, as opposed to me dissecting the old ones. But this is key. That might be the difference between IG or say Durams and say Adirams. It also might just be that I spend a lot of my time kind of talking to my spirits in my lair lab. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of fluid with reality.
No, I mean, I don't. That's basically what I was trying to convey, is that I instead of writing it down and nailing down like an exact picture of it, I just try to capture the feeling or the basic essence of it, because I know that there's more. I know that there's things before it and afterwards. Usually afterwards. Sometimes it's the last one in the line, but almost always I remember one somewhere in the middle of the line, and it's the one that's going to connect to the previous ones and the next ones.
Yeah.
And that's the one that's going to stick out the most. Like I think my spirits, they try not to put the most important one at the very end, unless they know I'm not having a good night's sleep. In which case, then they put it at the end because it's the easiest one to remember at that point. But I think they try to put the most meaningful one in the middle somewhere, so that there's things that connect to behind and ahead.
Makes sense.
If I can just get that one, and that's the one that I'm going for, like, because when I wake up, I'll get a feeling something really struck a chord with me, maybe in the Jai sense, but ultimately it feels like it's much more of like an other Mages thing. So it's not like it doesn't feel as connected, but whatever struck a chord with the Ni and the Jai, that's the one that's gonna help me remember the other ones.
Makes sense.
And I don't make a big deal out of remembering all of them. I just have to remember whatever it is that struck that chord.
Yeah, I think it's great, and it makes sense actually for the Adirams to do it that way. Curious for Charlene, myself, say real quick, is that I just find that for myself, because I don't have the Vi at all, that it's a distinction that works very well for me personally, which is I don't ask what was I dreaming. I just go a whole different direction. I ask why.
That makes sense.
I don't even ask
makes sense.
other than I feel kind of haggard, and I'll ask, why are we having dreams that make me feel like I'm feeling now? And they'll kind of tell me without really needing to get into exactly what I dreamed that night. I just know I dreamed something intense, and I'll be like, why was I dreaming something intense? And then they'll talk to me while I'm awake too.
Sometimes it could be like what you were thinking about right before you fell asleep, and then that might like bubble its way up and back when you go from sleepland into like waking land.
Jailene and I like to go to bed watching either nature shows or cartoons, or because you watch some heavy stuff. Obviously, you try to do the heavy stuff not the last thing you watch before you go to bed, because if you watch some series like hardcore stuff before you go to bed, it does mess with your dreams.
You can have all kinds of weird, trippy dreams, and then
Is that a bad thing?
Not necessarily, but I find that my dreams are already inclined to that. I generally don't have to do much to make me think that they're uncomfortably visceral and violent.
Visceral and violent. Yeah, I mean, I'm not dreams.
No, so if I watch cartoons at night, when I go to bed, it'll be a little less violent and a little more cartoonishly violent. You know what I mean? So like that. So if I actually watch something like Godfather before I go to bed, it'll just be murder you know, all night long.
So
Yeah, I see your point.
intensity is like something that just always is like a given anytime you're dreaming.
You know, modify
Yeah,
it.
I might do it like this.
One
super
thing, yours. I know the themes that you had in your dreams sometimes seem to be like ill intent getting its way on you.
Yeah, like I had
And also, precious things falling away. If you get to kind of both, like
yeah,
keeping negative influence out, like a positive thing.
yeah. On the negative one recurring, the one that I had is being chased or yeah, being chased by someone, you know, by someone who is hunting me. Sometimes with a knife, sometimes you know, just kind of a shadow. I had it was like I guess in my it was actually in my early 20s. 'Cause I kept having like these like ominous like people chasing me or and they would finally they would end up like the end of the dream would be them like killing me. And so I would have and sometimes I would have this so like several of these in one night and it would always end up with me dying till I finally I was like you know, I had like a almost like a conversation with my spirits during the dream, and I was like, you know, like, what do I do? I want this to stop, and they're like, you have to face it, you know, you have to, and then once, because it was scary, because it was really, it was like getting like more and more intense, but finally, like when I actually like faced the assailant, the shadowy assailant with the knife or whatever, then it it went he went away, and like I haven't really had those dreams since, that kind of thing.
You've had
I
dreams
like-
I know where you also were like people were like influencing your friends or if they didn't go to a bad place and you could see the influence but they couldn't or they were being moved by it and you weren't.
Yeah.
But you were scared to take action.
Yeah, I had those. I haven't had those recently, but I've had those in the past.
What have the ones been like with recently with your job and everything?
Recently, it's about you know, usually like recurring is like I'm with a group of people like on a mission. You know, like you tend to be in my dreams a lot, for example, but like you know, with a crew, and we're either trying. There's like some sort of conspiracy, like something going on, and we're trying to outpace the ones who are trying to close in on us, or you know, and that's where sometimes the jumbo jets come into play.
Then jumbo jets fall out of the sky.
Yeah, but those, and then just interactions with people about like me feeling sometimes like feeling like having to take control of things. Not people trying to like backstab, like do things behind my back, and I don't find out about it until like things happen, and I realize, oh, that person betrayed is a traitor or a traitor to the group. Yeah, I think that those are like times for my others talking to me. Yeah, it's you know them having like the Jian Zai, the betrayal or like things,
Being able to spot that
being
and-
able to spot that.
No.
And yeah, and the control thing and the dominance.
If you don't mind me asking if you on top of it's too sensitive, but I know sometimes when you're feeling stressed, your dreams sometimes have, mine do as well. Like for pets that we have, they don't have anymore.
Oh yeah. So haven't had it like too recently, but yeah, pretty recently, like where in the last like month, where sometimes like it'll be, well, it's been sort of progressing in theme. At first, you know, because we lost two pets
Very close to us.
that were really close to us, and it was a very traumatic experience, and like for a long time I wouldn't even like dream about it, but then I started dreaming about it, like they started coming into my dreams of like they were first like these lost creatures, like I couldn't like get to them. They were calling out for me, and I couldn't get to them. Then it progressed to they were trapped in somewhere, either a basement or just some place where, and they were just, like I could tell they were starving and or like they were dying, and I couldn't but I couldn't take care of them, or like I couldn't get to them. And then lately I've had somewhere like they actually show up in the dream and I'm petting them and like more like close, like shiny baby, and I get to pet them and be with them before they have to leave. So they do come into my dreams.
Yeah, my dreams were kind of like me, like rolling over them by accident and killing them as little tiny puppies, and then over time it got to where they would be safer around me and they would kind of snug with me. I feel kind of raw when I have those dreams, but good.
Yeah, I think it's a way of like processing going through the grieving experience.
I feel my jaw feels really kind of heavy in a healing way after I have those dreams.
Yeah. No.
Cool. Anyone else? Let's see. I think we have a few more minutes here. I'm curious what other dreams stuff we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, oh yes. How about waking dreaming?
Yeah.
Oh, waking dreams.
Intense daydreaming, basically. Lucid dreaming during the day.
Oh, this is a big one. I remember in school, I would always imagine sort of like incredibly fantastical things happening during like boring moments. Like you're sitting in a classroom, it's boring as heck, and then suddenly a wrecking ball comes in through the friggin' into the school. It's like, oh my gosh! And then you kind of go in there and you're like, no, I'm not like all you students. I'm gonna fix this. And then you do something incredibly.
Like that's just life for Nigeria. Waking dreams.
So I mean, that sort of thing happens every now and then. Not so much anymore, because I think I might be more living that now instead of like dreaming about it necessarily.
Living the wrecking balls.
That's interesting. How lucid dreaming?
Sometimes when I open my eyes, I kind of hallucinate a little bit. I'll open my eyes and like the colors look weird. And like I remember one time like my teacher looked like there was like fireworks coming out of her hair or something, like for just a second, like not a whole lot of time, but it's fun.
Or sometimes like there's like a darkness in or in the corner of your eye. You might notice that, you're like, oh, then you look over and you're like, what was that? Was that like a rat or something? But then it's like nothing. It's just sort of like in your head.
Yeah.
Janine, were you asking me if I do lucid dreaming?
Yeah, it's because I don't feel like I do that. I guess I have rare moments, but I don't feel like I don't feel like I have that experience as much. I have more so where like in my dreams I can actually like when I'm sleeping at night or whenever I can actually try to influence, and I do influence my dreams and actually like can make things manifest. I feel that, but not as much the lucid.
I can't actually relate, or I don't really think I understand the lucid dreaming, like being able to completely like take over and like start flying in your dream and like doing.
Well, it's not completely take over. It's degrees, and it's basically a lot of times it's not even taking over. I believe lucid dreaming basically means that you are in a dream state while being consciously aware you are in a dream state.
Yeah.
Oh well, that happens all the time. And I don't. that doesn't seem that big of a deal to me. Then.
That's at the beginning of like the Force, and then the next step from there is to assert yourself, as the apparatus by trying to take action. Some way. The first thing you have to recognize, actually, I'm in it. Even if you know you're in a dream, you're being thrown around. It's different if you are like looking at yourself and realizing, oh, this is happening to me, with like a bit of your conscious apparatus mind.
You're like there's certain things that are happening that are just unbelievable. They don't match up with natural law, but they are still somehow like true in a way. But it's interesting because it's a dream, right? So.
My dreams are so fantastical generally that it's not a question of like, are they believable? Yeah, they're just so arresting. That like
they are.
Sometimes I can't think to myself when I'm being thrown around by the 18th shark and he's tossing me in the air. I'm just so busy with that. It's sometimes hard to like think like, wait, not like it's a dream like, oh, you know, sharks don't actually juggle you in this strange arrangement of mercury you made up. Obviously, that's not actually happening. But just kind of like, for me, it's not confusion. I think it's more courage most time of actually like, stop. Let me, I'll basically tell the dream, let me think. And I can, sometimes I do that, like, I'll like also like press pause on it. And from there, I can then do more, I activate. The first thing is like being aware of it, and I'm like, okay, slow down. Or so, you know, basically like telling the dream, kind of like recognizing that there is some playlist connection to me. Like somehow I am affecting this playlist of scenes they're hitting me with. And so kind of like telling like the dreams, you know, playlist, like, okay, give me a second. give me a second. That's like the very beginning of like, oh, wait a minute, I think I'm actually somewhat in control of the playlist. But at first, you kind of, for me anyway, I mean, I'm sure other nights you're talking, like probably all do. The dream just kind of whooping on you. You know what I mean? Or, even being happy, it's just like throwing you. I feel like I'm just being like, like I'm being moved so much by it that it's hard to coalesce like, you know, a conscious level of.
Yeah, that is exactly what perfectly described. Like it's hard to even like get a hold on it.
A hold of yourself, yeah.
There's so much like upheaval
Going on
all the time.
Like,
Right? There's so much upheaval.
Real-ish elements. It's like just.
Yeah, exactly. To me, it's not the unrealistic. It's the how much it just takes up all my head and heart. Yeah. And I have to like find a little bit of that's just me and be like, wait. I have the right. I like a certain right to have my own thoughts separate from what the dream is just throwing out like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of like find your other in a way, right? I think find the one.
No, actually, it's not. Actually, the first thing I do is, if I describe it, I would call it like the eye of the storm. Even before the power to kind of like affect the whole scene, that's my whole synonym. That's too strong. But I can kind of like make a little bubble around me. Like I mentioned, I sometimes make like a hot bubble. And I sort of heat of like, wait a minute. I have the power to influence this. It's not just the dream does to me. I can do to dream. And so I have to. There's a critical moment where I kind of do it, and I kind of can make a little bubble in the storm, and then I can start moving things. And you're right. Usually when I do that, they change scene, give a new storm. I like you bastards.
It's like you have to realize you're the chosen one.
This one out.
Yeah.
Anyone.
It's like a little hero's journey.
Does anyone ever have like? I mean, I guess good dreams do happen. What about like? Usually, what we're talking mainly about like when dreams go nightmarish in a way.
Well, dreams generally are dealing with what you have not processed yet. So for a lot of people, that will be a lot of daru, just because of what's built up through your daily life. But Charlene and I just said actually, like the experience of those pets that died. A lot of times, I do feel actually a deep warmth afterwards, like a poignancy, a sadness, but it feels healing and right.
Yeah, and I thought other warm dreams. Like
obviously, there's wet dreams, so clearly, I mean.
well.
Erotic dreams, those are generally happy.
They would be.
Or it could be just like your life is going in the direction that you want it to be going, and you're just like overall happy with like everything the way that's happening. And that tends to be, I think, more like a daydream, but it does, I think, happen as far as like sleeping dreams at night as well.
I do actually have dreams where, like, for me, it feels good. I mean, as an IG, which I'll call like shirtless dreams. I get them a lot of times when I'm doing things that are challenging, but I'm training very hard for them. It'll start like conditioning my dreams. My dreams will be affected by how much I'm conditioning myself to do well at this. It's usually dreams that are going to be scary because I'm scared of like failing. But after a while, I'll like dominate the fear in the dream where I'll have visions of they do this, I do this. This comes up, I do this, and it's like a series of things. They're like issues, and I'm noting how easily I can set them right. But that does tend to happen more when I am training for something in particular.
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of the dreams that I have are maybe like a Nages mirror of that, because a lot of it is like feeling so alone and so desolate, even if in a place full of people. and just looking for some sort of meaning and trying to make some sense of things, and I just can't. It's like being out on a country road in the back of a pickup, like with a bunch of people I don't know who they are, and like I don't know where we're going, and then suddenly I'm in like a big city, like waiting in line to get somewhere, but I don't really care. I don't really know anyone there, and I feel if everything just feels totally alien. Every now and then I'll have a dream where I can pull a bunch of things together and like do like this neat kind of mastery thing, um, and have that be recognized by the dream. But that's rare. That's very rare. Usually my dreams are like a challenge to deal with the fact that I can't seem to like find anything to latch onto. I can't seem to find any stimulus.
I definitely I'd say percentage-wise that I have way more challenging dreams than triumphant dreams.
Right, absolutely. I mean, the triumphant, the triumphant dreams almost they're like a little treat that you get sometimes, but they're not. They don't challenge you to move ahead, so they're not as useful in that way.
Yes and no. They can be very useful. I found
Right.
you need to be in a certain headspace. They can kind of give you the confidence you need.
Yeah, exactly. But most often my spirits don't go for that route or for giving me confidence. They go more this like challenging me, like making me feel like deeply. My
spirits do generally go and challenge me first, but like say I have something that's coming up for 3 months. The beginning dreams will generally be me being just pounded, getting crushed by this thing. And then as I'll train over a few weeks or months, the dreams will react to that.
Yeah, no, but the cycle, I guess, that you're describing and like the reaction that you get from like, it may not sound this way, but the feeling that I get from just being in these kinds of like waking up on a beach with a gun in your hand kind of scenarios with like I don't know where to go and I don't know what this means, and having that happen in rapid sequence in many different places in many different situations without any resolution, that feels like that to me, like it feels like being tossed around. It feels like being tossed around. Like when I wake up, I'm always in a really bad mood. Like I'm like, what the fuck is that all about? Like why does that have to happen to me? You know, and it just it makes me feel I don't know. I don't like it at all. Like in fact sometimes I feel like I would rather take some of your dreams, because that just seems like something I can at least reason. I can say, okay, this is happening for some reason. There's some reason.
Like I said, it only happens those few rare times. Generally, I would say my dreams leave me feeling very harried. I feel kind of like tired when I wake up. In fact, pretty much a constant, Jailene knows, is she'll look over me like, rough night. I'm like, I'm awake now. Me and my daughter have an understanding, like, do what you can when I'm asleep, motherfucker. Because the moment I wake up, I'm back on the job.
That's basically how I think of it as well. I mean, like for an IG, having that kind of crushing pressure from the outside feels really overwhelming. But for an EJI, having that total absence of anything, it's like being free floating in space. It feels just as bad.
Sure.
As it would.
Like disorienting.
It just empty of meaning, empty of like reason. Like a lot of the times when I wake up, I'm just like, what's the point of even going on? What's the point of anything? But like, wait, that's what my Daryu is trying to tell me. That's not what I actually think. And so the challenge is to get beyond that.
That's cool, interesting.
And a lot of times, the point is to answer the question.
Yeah, that's how your Daryu usually does it. It gives you hard questions that you don't have an answer to.
They'll
and to try and to get you to answer those questions. You'd be like, hey, there's a problem over here. And then it's not supposed to be like, oh my gosh, this is a problem. Yeah, and it's not supposed to be like wallowing in the problem and like, oh, it's supposed to be like solve the problem. That's how you're supposed to approach it.
I'm starting to have an understanding at some point of like, okay, if you don't want me to dunk you again with that same thing, you'll have to do better today. It's always be a challenge in there, but it definitely, I would say that having taught my spirits over many years, I do notice that they respond in a general way to like how I'm living my life. Like my daydreams will be affected differently. In general, if I'm just my general mood, and I notice that whatever my general mood is, it is affecting the dreams to some degree as well. Like I think when I was younger, I saw the process more separate, but over time, it seems more like a single dialogue that kind of just has different, waking, sleeping, and twilight phases.
Interesting.
It's interesting. I noticed that I'll often have dreams where both my Daryu and my other have a strong presence. Like there might be a Daryu lesson, but then my other is in the dream as well to teach me something or to add kind of like a tone to it. So it's interesting. And sometimes have both involved. And I'm sure like all of your spirits can be involved.
That kind of reminds me of
That's a
like
common theme. You're right.
that kind of reminds me of that one song from Middle Class Rut, New Low. Because it's sort of like a Daryu overall, but then at the end, it's sort of like the Mijai kind of like shows up, the other, but then it's still kind of rocky.
Not making progress. I always mention that thing is like
Because it's like your spirits want you to move higher, so that they might give you kind of
progress. Following up a truck is progress.
they might kind of give you a sense of like how you can move higher, like having put your other in there. So it's not just like crushing like pain and
Because it went from like very like painful sort of like humiliating deaths, and then eventually became just dying, and then just eventually became like this. The deaths became less and less, I guess, severe in a way. But then eventually, then at the end, it's just sort of like a bumpy ride.
Right.
So it's still painful.
One
It's still
element I think is very crucial in any dreams for anyone is I do think you have to try to activate your will to make progress. If you can just in your head when you're dreaming try to hold to that, I want something better.
right.
If you'll do that, you're basically calling on your mental clarity, you're calling on your courage, and then whatever mojo is and whatever your spirits want, if you're basically saying, okay, because basically generally dreams have a lot to do with stuff that you are not doing. So if you basically say, okay, what's going on here? The dreams usually doesn't really get like necessarily nicer, but they'll make more sense, a lot more purpose. Because I've never talked by spirits where if you don't talk long enough, there isn't a reason why you're feeling what you're feeling. You just may not want to take the time to work through it or look at it.
And then you can start changing the way the momentum is. Instead of going in the negative direction, you can start getting it to move in the positive direction. But it can be a little bit difficult at first. But
Sure.
keep doing it, then it keeps getting more and more in your favor. So
I do have dreams sometimes that are just like those that tend to not necessarily like remember them a lot of times, but I do feel like blissful when I wake up. Like seems like maybe sometimes like more related to the shiny baby or Fumasta. And
Also your other as well.
Yeah, my other. Sometimes it can feel like I just like was in a womb or like had like in a like immersed in a shy bath. I wake up like feeling refreshed and sort of
Nice.
like like sort of just, and there's like this I guess like seeing the world with new eyes kind of thing. Like the eyes of a child or
Nice.
yeah.
Lucky.
Those are good.
I don't get that.
All right, well, it's about 7:40. You should probably call it. That was a great conversation, and I think we'll be revisiting this topic a lot because there's just so much to get into.
for sure.
All right, we'll call it a night, and I'll see everybody next time then.
All right then.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
See ya.